Welcome to the State Budget Overview video for the University of Washington Bothell. My name is Christian Adams and I'm an analyst in the Office of Institutional Planning and Budget, and I will be narrating this video. This project has been sponsored by the Office of the Chancellor. Its primary intention is to function as a Budget 101 video for members and stakeholders of the campus community. Within this video, we are going to focus on sharing historical state and tuition funding data for the campus. Our intended audience members are members of the UW-Bothell campus. The data presented will stay at a very high level, so we will focus on presenting data at the Bothell institutional level as well as the divisional levels of the campus. We will focus only on state budgets, so focusing on GOF and DOF operating funds. We will look at the most recently completed 6 fiscal years or 3 biennia, so fiscal 2012 through 2017. With regards to student data, we will focus only on autumn, winter, and spring quarters, as well as state-reported students. For any data that is outside of this scope or more detailed views, please contact the Office of Institutional Planning and Budget. State budgets can be divided into 2 main funding sources, the first of which is General Operating Funds, or GOF. These funds are generally intended to support the instructional mission and administrative and support functions of the university. And these funds are primarily composed of state appropriations and the operating fee revenue, which is a portion of the tuition revenue of the campus. The second funding source is Designated Operating Funds, or DOF. These funds, the university has sort of unlimited discretion for use, but as a matter of internal policy, the university has restricted their use to funding types or usage types that are similar to use as GOF funds. DOF funds are comprised of summer quarter revenue, overhead charges to grant budgets, various miscellaneous fees of the campus, and unused GOF and DOF funds from the previous biennia. One note that I want to mention is that beginning in fiscal 16, the University of Washington changed its practice to where unused GOF and DOF funds are now returned to UW-Bothell in the same funding source of which they were created. So any unused funds from GOF from the previous biennium are now returned to UW-Bothell as GOF funds and not automatically pushed into DOF funds. So some of the fund types that are out of scope of this video will include research cost recovery funds, which are the overhead costs associated with grant and research dollars. However, the overhead allocated to the UW-Bothell Office of Research is included within this data. Other fund sources not included are gifts, endowments, discretionary funds, self-sustaining funds and activities of the campus, fee-based programs, and various student fees, to include but not limited to course fees, the services and activities fee, and the student technology fee. Again, if you need data on these fund types, please contact the Office of Institutional Planning and Budget. And just to frame fiscal years and biennia, a fiscal year is a single year of which Bothell is allowed to allocate permanent allocations across and within the campus. At the University of Washington, a fiscal year runs from July 1 through June 30th, and the fiscal year is referred to as the year ending that fiscal year. So fiscal 2012 runs from July 1st, 2011 through June 30th, 2012. And incremental tuition funds and new state appropriations are allocated to UW-Bothell on an annual basis for the fiscal year. A biennium is 2 fiscal year periods, which forms the basis of the primary state budget cycle. In a biennium, for example, biennium 2011 through 2013 will be fiscal years 2012 and 2013, or on a calendar will run from July 1, 2011 through June 30, 2013. And carryover funds and net summer quarter revenue allocated to UW-Bothell are allocated on a biennial basis. Sources of funding for the University of Washington Bothell. The primary source of funds for the campus are student FTEs and student tuition dollars. And spending authority is allocated to UW-Bothell based off of how many students are enrolled at UW-Bothell. As you can see, the gray bars are undergraduate student FTEs on campus, with the white bars being graduate students FTE. You can see from fiscal 12 to where the campus was just over 3,000 FTE to the most recently completed fiscal year 2017 to just over 5,000 student FTE. These are annualized numbers for the campus, so you can see there's been quite a bit of growth over the past 6 years. With that, we get two main funding sources of GOF are the student tuition dollars and state appropriations dollars from the state. State appropriation dollars can come for general use, or they can be focused investments from the state, such as a desire to increase computer science majors or support for salary and benefit increases for staff and faculty and student workers. As you can see in fiscal 2012, the combination of state and tuition combined to just over $40 million, whereas in fiscal 17, you can see that number has approached $70 million of the operating budget for the campus. As a percentage of each other, it's interesting to see how the relationship between tuition and state appropriations has changed over time. Looking back to fiscal 2012, approximately 75% of the operating budget came from tuition dollars, with 25% coming from state appropriations. While that number shrank from 13, 14, and 2015, that number did start to move in a direction of more state appropriations as a component of the operating budget. Whereas in fiscal 17, 70% of the operating budget was tuition and 30% of it was state appropriations. Part of this was driven by the resident undergraduate tuition reduction for students and an increased investment in state appropriations. As a measure of FTE, this graph is displaying how much those sources of funds are supporting each student FTE on campus. The brown bar at the bottom is state appropriation, so you can see over time in fiscal 2012, there was approximately $3,200 of state appropriation per student FTE, whereas in fiscal 17, that number has increased to just over $4,200. The purple bar is tuition collected per FTE, and that number did increase, but you can see it has remained relatively stable as a comparator between fiscal 12 and fiscal 17. This is in large part due to the reduction in undergraduate tuition rates that took effect in fiscal 16 and fiscal 17. And the white bar is the summation of the tuition and state appropriation bars. You can see in fiscal 12, for funding for campus, Bothell had about $12,746 per student FTE, whereas in fiscal 17, that number was just under $14,000 worth of funding per FTE. This chart displays the temporary GOF and DOF funding allocated to the university. These numbers are in millions, the purple bar being DOF temporary, with the white or yellow bar being GOF temporary dollars. And these dollars come back to the university every biennium, so it is not unusual to see a spike in the beginning of the biennium, like you see in fiscal 12, fiscal 14, and fiscal 16. And that money can be utilized across the entire biennium, not just in a single fiscal year. So looking at total sources of funds, you have four categories, the purple being tuition, which you can see rising over time generally, and that's a reflection of the growing student population on campus. The yellow bar is state appropriations, and again, that number has been growing over time with the recent investment from the state. The white box is the DOF temporary funds, and this is generally a mixture of carryover funds from the previous biennium, summer quarter revenue, and miscellaneous fees collected by the university. And the bars that are barely visible, the sort of gray bars, are the GOF temporary funds. Again, that is a change in methodology from the University of Washington starting in fiscal 16, where funds, unused funds from the previous biennium, are now coming back in the source of funds that created them. Funding allocations following the divisional structure. The University of Washington Bothell has essentially four major structures across campus: the Office of the Chancellor and three divisions. Within the Office of the Chancellor, as it relates to funding, you will find the General Chancellor's Office, the General Faculty Organization, and the General Staff Organization. Within the Division of Academic Affairs, led by Vice Chancellor Jeffords, you will find the 5 schools and the first-year pre-majors program, the Office of Academic Affairs, the Division of Enrollment Management, the Division of Student Affairs, Library, the Information Technology, and various student and administrative support offices. Within the Division of Advancement and External Relations, you will find the Office of Advancement and External Relations, the Office of Development, the Office of Alumni Relations, Office of Government and Community Relations, Office of Communications, and Office of Events. Within the Division of Planning and Administration, you will find the Office of Planning and Administration, Auxiliary Services, Facility Services, Physical Planning and Space Management, Campus Safety, Organizational Excellence and Human Resources, Fiscal and Audit Services, and Institutional Planning and Budget. Within Central, you will find that this is where funding is held for activities such as the Campus Reserve, payments of overhead to UW Seattle, the expenditures and funding associated with utilities, lease and rent, the operations and maintenance of various buildings, various institutional capital projects, and any pending allocations that haven't been made to the university. One note that I would like to make is that there were some reorganizations effective at UW-Bothell within fiscal 18, notably the Office of Institutional Research, the Information Technology, and the Division of Enrollment Management. Those changes did not take effect till fiscal 18, which is not the data being presented, so we are presenting the structures as they were for the data, as it is presented. So looking at the permanent funding by division, following that methodology, you can see over a 6 years period of time where the funding has been allocated within the divisions. And in the last column, you see a data point called CAGR. This is compound annual growth rate. This is a nice calculation that smooths out some of the spikes in growth and funding sources over time. You can see across the University of UW-Bothell, the permanent funding across campus has increased by approximately 9%, with that allocation being spread across the Office of the Chancellor, who has grown at a CAGR rate of 10%, the Division of Academic Affairs at 9%, Division of Advancement and External Relations at 12%, and the Division of Planning and Administration at 18%. As a percentage of allocations, you can see the bottom bar, the dark purple bar, is the Office of the Chancellor, generally makes up about 1.5% to 2% of the campus's permanent allocation. The Division of Academic Affairs has been held steady between 73% and 74%. The white bar is the Division of Advancement and External Relations, which is approximately 3% of the permanent funding allocation. The Division of Planning Administration has expanded from 7% to approximately 11%, and the central funds have been approximately 14 to 11% of the permanent allocations of the university. Bringing in all funding by division, this will include the temporary sources of funding along with the permanent. You can again see the numbers presented in millions for the various divisions and areas of campus. Again, across the entire campus, the CAGR is approximately 7%, with most divisions aligning to that number. Again, a presentation of a stacked bar chart of the all fundings by division. You can see that there is relatively little movement across the divisions, with most units holding pretty steady with their numbers. Funding allocations by funding category. There's various funding categories of which we are allowed to allocate funds for the University of Washington-Bothell. Primarily, it is salaries and benefits and non-salary. Within salaries and benefits, we can allocate funds to faculty, graduate students, classified staff, professional staff, and hourly and OT. Within hourly and overtime, we are talking about student workers, hourly workers, and any faculty or staff who might be receiving excess compensation for additional duties. Within non-salary, it can be any number of activities to include but not limited to supplies, materials, travel, any contracts. When looking at a categorical view, you can see where the permanent funding is allocated across the University of Washington-Bothell. Again, the general growth in permanent funds is 9%, but as you look at the categories for faculty, their salaries and benefits have increased annually on an average of about 10%. The increase for graduate students has been approximately 6%. Classified and professional staff have been 10 and 11% respectively. Hourly and OT has increased by approximately 9%, with the increases to non-salary activities approximately 6%. As comparative against each other, you can see that the permanent allocations for faculty have held relatively steady from 44 to 46%. Graduate students are hard to see, and they're in the white lines here. but approximately 0.3 to 0.4% of the permanent allocation. Allocations for classified have held relatively steady at 12%, with the allocation for professional increasing from 22 to 24%. Allocations for hourly and OT have held relatively steady at 2%, while the non-salary allocation has fluctuated between 20 and 17%. Bringing in the all funds by category, these are allocations of both permanent and temporary funds. You can see the allocation across the years, and on a stacked bar chart, you see a little more fluctuation because temporary dollars are historically allocated to non-salary. Hence, you see spikes in the beginning of the biennium when those temporary dollars are allocated. So you can see growth of non-salary from 35% to 24% to 43% and so on. This is primarily driven by our budget system allocating temporary dollars to non-salary activities. In the summary, if you have any additional questions, please contact the Office of Institutional Planning and Budget. And please, if you're interested in data on uses of funds, please watch the additional video provided. Thank you.